Whatever external circumstances you have in your story, those external events will poke at your character's dueling desires and will force your character to make choices that aren't easy. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has a story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and writing coach, and each week we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let's begin. The most common struggle writers have when writing their first novel, or even revising their first novel, is structure. Plotters overthink and often overcomplicate their plot, and pantsers run amok with too much material for them to metabolize into a streamlined, focused, compelling story. Both plotters and pantsers get overwhelmed with the sheer volume of their material. Now, I'm not a plotter. I can't just outline, not even a podcast. I have to write in order to know what I'm trying to say. I can't think without writing. I don't know what I have to say until I try to articulate it through writing and revision. That's how I think my way through anything. It's just the way my brain is wired. But I still think structurally, and I learned it the hard way. In my first MFA semester at Vermont College of Fine Arts, I told my mentor that I had an aimless approach to writing a first draft and that I was concerned about that. I thought it was impeding me from writing a story that worked, that was unified and coherent and had a clear underlying story goal or problem that my main character was trying to solve. I didn't feel like I had any story clarity. So whichever side of the spectrum you're on, whether you're a plotter or a pantser or somewhere in between, when it comes to writing, we still get overwhelmed with our own material, with the volume of ideas we have about the story. And the story becomes unwieldy very fast, and then we write ourselves into a deep hole. So often we just throw too much into the pot and we overcomplicate the story. There are too many balls in the air, and this makes it harder to write and follow as a reader. But getting our arms around our material is simpler than you think. Now, notice I did not say easy, but often when a story breaks down, it's because the underlying foundation isn't thought out or explored deeply enough. So in this episode, I'm going to give you 3 character decisions to make before you structure your story. Before you hit all the beats you've been told to hit, or anytime you feel lost or overwhelmed in the middle of your story, which is where most writers get overloaded and stuck. So let's get right to it. Number 1, what does your character come into the story already wanting, even if they don't think they have a chance of getting it? Too often, character goals or desires are vague or on the surface. There's an external goal, which of course the story needs, but all our desires are internally driven. They're emotionally driven. There's a pain we're trying to avoid and some pleasure we're obsessively running towards. Our desires are fraught with internal conflict and reflexive thought patterns that get in our way. When something matters deeply, it always comes with waves of crippling self-doubt, fear, and resistance, and failure. We learn more from failure than we do from success. I don't even like to call it failure because that connotation gets a bad rap. So think more in terms of challenges. In any endeavor we set out to do, if it's meaningful to us, it doesn't come easy. It's hard won. And we become better versions of ourselves in the process. Think of writing a novel or memoir. That's the external goal. That's the urgent desire. When something matters to us, it kicks up our biggest resistance. We're afraid we don't have what it takes. What if I fail? That's our biggest fear. When it gets hard, as it should and will, we want to give up. But we don't. We keep recommitting to the goal. Why? Because it matters too much and we have no other choice. And your main character is no different. So it's not enough to know what or who your character wants, the concrete goal, but why it matters. For example, in David Nichols' novel, You Are Here, Marnie wants to move away from her loneliness and isolation. She comes into the novel with that need. She's divorced. She works from home, which means she works pretty much all the time. She wants to solve this problem, but it doesn't come easy. When her friend invites her to a New Year's Eve party, she fakes illness to avoid going. On the other side of town is Michael, also divorced, but who is perfectly content to go on long walks by himself to avoid being home alone. He does not want to socialize, and the implication is that he's been hurt by the divorce, and his solitude is a way to protect himself from getting hurt again. So both of these main characters come into the story already wanting something. Both are lonely, but they approach their problem in opposite ways. He moves towards isolation. She wants to move away from it. Both of their desires are stated early in the novel or implied. By the end of the first chapter, this is 3.5 pages in, she acknowledges this. Sometimes she thought it's easier to remain lonely than present the lonely person to the world, but she knew that this too was a trap, that unless she did something, the state might become permanent, like a stain soaking into wood. So the desire is stated. She wants to solve this problem. She's lonely and she wants to do something about it. Now, this is a love story, but she's not romantically lonely at this point. She's not yearning for a lover. She's just isolated at home. So she comes into the novel already wanting to solve her problem, which is loneliness. So your character comes into the story with a powerful want, one that is a hard one. Marnie may want to solve her loneliness problem, but there's not an immediate solution, and there's still some resistance she needs to dissolve before she solves this problem. Michael will also have to fight his need to isolate himself socially. So we have two characters, co-protagonists, who come into the story already wanting something, already wanting to solve a particular problem. He's running towards isolation. She's running away from it. That's the desire they both come into the novel with. Those desires will then manifest itself in something more tangible, or will be tested, which will present mounting obstacles. So, foundation number 1, what does your character come into the story already wanting? Okay, on to character foundation number 2. dueling desires. At the heart of every story, there is a dilemma. The dilemma comes from your character's dueling desires. Whatever external circumstances you have in your story, those external events will poke at your character's dueling desires and will force your character to make choices that aren't easy. Often our wants are complicated by a dueling but still powerful counter desire. For example, if Janet hates her job and wants to quit, let's say it's become increasingly unbearable. She's bored, micromanaged, and wants to quit. She may even have her resignation letter drafted, but she also has doubts that are pulling her in an opposite direction. How will I survive without said job? Something will happen to make her finally commit to the goal. Something will tip the scales. So there's a want versus the practical impulse. There's a belief that gets in the way. Whatever happens on the plot level is there to trigger that inner conflict. Okay, character foundation number 3. Where does your character end up? What's the transformation? What's the payoff at the end of the story? What's the payoff after all the external challenges and obstacles have played out? Now, you don't have to have your ending dialed in or written, but you do need to have a general idea of how your character will end up at the end of the story. You want to have the end in mind when you start writing your beginning. Will she get what she wants or not? Will Marnie and Michael get to be together or not? Will Sarah get to run away with her lover Todd? Will he really leave his wife and son to be with her? Will Joan solve the crime before the bad guys kill her? The answer could be yes, but at what cost? Or it could be no, but she gains something unexpected. Anna Karenina gets what she wants. She gets to be with Vronsky, but reality with him leads to despair and suicide. Frank Wheeler wants to quit his job and move to Paris to appease his wife, but at the end he goes back to his boring job and even takes a promotion, but loses his wife and kids in the process. So you want to put your character against two equally compelling desires, two competing desires, and your character's choices will lead to consequences. Okay, so let's wrap this up. If you're having structure problems with your novel, start with character. The most compelling stories are about a character solving a problem. Whatever happens on the plot level, the external events, will trigger the internal conflict. So, number 1, what does your character come into the story already wanting? Number 2, what dueling desires are at war with one another? And how do the story's external events stoke that inner conflict? And number 3, what's the payoff at the end? Will she get what she wants or not? And at what cost? So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And if you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform and please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.